I have the situation in PHP. Everybody was laughing at PHP, that it's a weird language.
We still do.
Yeah, but the problem is they started building up, and now it has really a lot of decent features. The language changed completely. But the problem is they have this rapid release. And if you look on some of the old PHP versions, which are no longer supported, there is nothing that prevents you from using them, but you have no support. So this puts you in a risky situation.
I think we should also put a major caveat that no support is no free support. You can probably always hire someone to offer you support.
Yes.
Let's be clear, it's not the fault of open source maintainers, but because we cannot really force them to do things that they haven't paid for, they are not being paid for.
But I had a short experience with, pre-ordering infrastructure in data center of a big company which runs data centers few months in advance. But also, what goes as someone who's has someone who's dealing with building data centers at home. There's also, what's going on if you don't have, energy? Is it certified data center? Are you running the server in your house? Because if the power goes down, what's going on?
I think we should talk about 3 problems today. And the problem, which is very annoying, especially for business owners, and I think all of you have this problem that you have to sell this every now and then, that some stuff is simply deprecated on release. And I'm talking about you, JavaScript, especially, that there are so many frameworks which simply lack the enterprise support for years. And that makes really development kind of harder. Because every now and then, you simply have to upgrade the frameworks that you depend on. Otherwise, you risk being forgotten, or even worse, you risk being left insecure. What are your experiences in that area? Because I have some really bad examples. How about you?
I think there was also one of the examples from this week when there was I think it was NPM package security threat. So the update of all the secrets and dependencies across multiple customers, that was not fun.
Yeah, that's a completely poisoning of repositories. That's a different thing. But what I'm mostly worried is, Jarek, probably that was the discussion we had last week about how should you actually develop a new mobile application.
We started talking about Maui and other cross-platform frameworks. At some point, we touched on Vue, using Vue for this kind of development. And my first impression was like, please don't. I love Vue. I built more than one product using Vue, but the release cycle and constant update cycle is just brutal. It's not geared toward people who want to have long-lasting solutions.
And I think the biggest problem is here that's the moment when you start thinking that companies like Microsoft and other big behemoths that make living in IT also a hell, they are so successful because they give you tools that allow you to actually run your applications for 10, 15 years.
I wholeheartedly agree. If I were to, for example, stand up a new hypervisor platform on the server, I would use VMware. Although there are probably better open source tools out there. But I know that VMware is so ingrained in so many enterprises that I have some safety net, some I can rely on the software being there in 2 years and 3 years with right security patches without forcing me to make major upgrades. Maybe, Paulina, you have probably more DevOps-related examples you can contribute to this conversation.
What is it, Paulina, that makes your life super hard? Because I work a lot with software also, but what in your DevOps line, what is really so annoying that you basically start using something and in a year or 2, you suddenly have to contact the customer, say like, listen up, there is a major upgrade, we have to change a lot.
Open source. You have a lot of, small open source solutions which are supported till particular point, and suddenly you have to, for example, from Docker we went to Kaniko, from Kaniko you're going to build or something else, and it's changed every year. And if you have very complex organization, suddenly you need to switch, and it's not matter of 1 to 3 repositories, but you need to change pipelines for a few hundreds repositories. It's quite a difference, and you also need to teach also not only the platform or DevOps team or whatever, but also the developers what do they need to know know about it, at least on the basic level. So you have exercise about one thing is migration, another thing is being able to support it, and third thing, being able to teach developers what do they need to know to being able to use it.
Yeah, it's a really good point about this open source side of it. So my comment about Vue on the JavaScript side, yeah, you can probably hire the organization behind Vue to give you commercial support and extend it and keep it alive. But most organizations, or especially small ones, probably don't have funds. We rely on open source to be the kind of give us the tools that we can use to build other cool things on top of it. So I think that's the very good point of the hidden cost of open source that comes from the freedom of being able to choose the tech stack, but someone has to maintain it, right? It's free, but it's not really free in many ways, right?
So the thing is, rapid release gives you a lot of new features, but in the long term, if you want stability, if you hit the sweet spot, you just want to continue developing in that framework, stay secure.
Yeah. You either have a cost of yourself switching, or you pay someone to give you support.
Exactly.
But you also have some successful, for example, long-term projects. Like I know there's a lot of, for example, not fan of Jenkins, there's a lot of easier way, but across me working for 10 years in IT, I've seen so many organizations on Jenkins still, and it's open source, but it's quite well maintained. You have often release cycles and so on. I'm not saying it's the best solution, but maintaining of it and release cycle and so on, it's quite good, in my opinion.
And I completely agree with you. I think there are two different types of open source organizations. So you have those who are borderline like Linux, always rock solid, and you have support for many, many years even going back. I could say things about like Postgres. You can still get Postgres 12, which is probably obsolete function-wise, but it's still okay. But then contrasted with JavaScript world, still open source, but there is a implicit behavior in the people who maintain JavaScript frameworks. In 2 years, you effectively you end up with nothing. After 2 years, things are unmaintained, left behind, and you as a business who use it, you have to rewrite. So there are different ways of maintaining open source projects.
Yeah, also especially if you have smaller open source projects, when you have one developer attached to it, and when he's gone, the technology is not maintained anymore.
Here again, I would say there are the interesting outliers. So look at the guy who maintains curl. Everyone uses curl. That tool, I forgot the name. He lives in Sweden or somewhere. There's one person, and I know he has some other supporters, and his application is maintained and alive for decades at this point, and it's amazing. But then, as you said, there are some open source maintainers who simply disappear after a year or two, and it's their complete right to stop doing it because they do it for free. But we, as people who implement tools with these libraries, we have to keep in mind what's the impact.
But also, I think that some of
Paulina.
No, just comment to curl. I think some of them becoming such a baseline that even if the guy would stop maintaining it, someone else in the community would take over and maintain it.
Yeah, that's true.
Let me have a talk, because I think we...
No, I think the problem is also here that I think we have two problems here. Two issues. One is that, of course, you are left without any support, and then you simply fall down. And some of the products, I still think they are secure, but you risk this thing that if there comes a zero or something, you're on your own. And the other problem is rapid release, because secure-wise, feature-wise, you have something which is more or less complete, but the world is progressing. Yes, like I have the situation with PHP. Everybody was laughing at PHP that it's a weird language.
They still do.
Yeah, but the problem is they started building up, and now it has really a lot of decent features. The language changed completely. But the problem is they have this rapid release. And if you look on some of the old PHP versions, which are no longer supported, there is nothing that prevents you from using them, but you have no support. So this puts you in a risky situation, yes? But you're right.
I think we should also put a major caveat that no support is no free support. You can probably always hire someone to offer you support.
Yes.
Let's be clear, it's not the fault of open source maintainers, but because we cannot really force them to do things that they haven't paid for, they are not being paid for.
I have a story regarding something what is not maintained, but I think it was somewhere, something was wrote in assembler, and it was something connected to the nuclear power plant, and they couldn't find almost anyone to be able to do it, and they had, there was an issue with the service, so they found like one super old guy who was still a specialist in it, but he said he doesn't gonna help unless they're gonna pay him like crazy amount of money, and they've done it actually. So it is possible to usually find someone who's a specialist in it also, but it's quite hard to get a skill set if something is not maintained. So that's also a lesson to being able to upgrade on the regular basis.
If you take an average age of JavaScript developer, then we probably have a slightly different situation. But that's because
of course, we're not there yet.
People move between frameworks so frequently that it's insane.
But the problem is we have a hidden cost of running open source, and of course the problem is that I can upgrade the framework. You can upgrade the framework. You can change the tools. But then you have to build a customer and say, listen up, you have to pay me so many hours. And what do you get in terms of features? 0. You only get the idea that you will be compliant for the next 1-2 years, or you're actually buying some form of insurance. Yes. So this is something that I think all the business people that are buying software, custom software, which is giving them a leading edge in many ways, especially when they use open source. They should remember that. And if you were to start the project today, after we finish recording, would you still choose open source? Yes or no? There is nothing in between. Paulina?
Yes.
It depends.
Okay. I would choose open source, but I would like to know your independence. What does it mean? Where do you draw the line?
What type of technology? What are you trying to do with it? For what kind of project? What people do you have in the team? What budget do you have?
But when you start, it depends on the organization and depends on the project as well. If it's, for example, if it's an organization that is built on Java Enterprise or Spring or something of its sort, I would go with Spring and Java. I know it's Oracle. It's not purely open source in some other aspects.
But it's free, yes?
But it's free. And if you really need to, you can call someone and they will give you commercial support. And it's going to be there for the next 20 years, like it was for 20 years back.
Cool. But when you start the project, do you start actually from looking at open source alternatives or open source choices first? Then you look into commercial ones, or do you have some use cases where you know that open source is not good enough, we go commercial immediately? Do you have something like that?
Are we talking about the services or are we talking about the software? Because if it comes to software that I used to build my solution, I would go with the open source first. When it comes to service, I'll be more lenient. I will probably focus more on the established commercial service providers because they have better incentive to stay alive for a long period of time to support my implementation. So it really depends.
Can you quickly name service? Just give me 1-2 examples of service.
Let's say for integrations, I would probably look at Zapier because they have been in the business for a long time. They have established customer base. It's highly unlikely they would disappear overnight. That's what we one of the examples. Likewise, I can have, this is not parallel with open source, but when we talk about free versus not free, I would integrate with DeepL translation API because there's a real business behind it who charges money versus Google Translate. Because Google Translate might be deprecated in who knows when. We know how Google loves to kill services.
The quality of translation and the promise that DeepL has actually in the commercial version, that they forget your data.
Yeah, there's other aspects of it, but kind of on a superficial level, like free versus commercial paid for. This is how I would make a choice.
Before I give the voice to Paulina, I will just say that I'm on the same team and I also add actually commercial developer tools because some of the stuff I actually pay for and sometimes big money. But Paulina, yes?
Yeah, I pay for some of the stuff, but my comment was that sometimes customer already comes with something what is sometimes approved by their legal team as well, because of the industry they are in, or because of they have some internal requirements. That's the other part. So sometimes okay, I would suggest something else, but they already want to use something and they don't want to go through whole process of getting it approved within their own legal team again. So yeah, sometimes you have a choice and you can recommend something, but sometimes it's already decided by you, for you.
Yeah, there's always a constraint coming from the client.
Basically, so the conclusion is that yes, it makes a lot of sense to use open source, although be aware of the idea that it is very often deprecated on the release day, especially in JavaScript world, and that you have the hidden cost of actually staying current. Yes, so I think this is kind of important. And there are some stuff that I also, like you said, Jarek, pay for. I also pay for everything with communication, because I want to be sure that the SMS messages are delivered, that emails are delivered, that some important integrations that deliver a certain service at a certain quality, that this actually really happens. But this brings me actually to another subject, which I think is kind of cool, because we've been talking about the hidden cost of running open source. Do you see a hidden cost of not running a cloud? Because last time we've been talking about moving out from cloud, and there was the discussion about DHH doing his own stunt. But do you think, is there a hidden cost of not running the cloud?
Yes.
Jarek?
Definitely. I would say it's not so hidden.
Okay, so give me quickly, each of you, give me quickly one reason why it's not hidden. What is the biggest thing in your opinion?
Skill set, that's one.
Jarek?
Infrastructure costs money. It doesn't just disappear because you move from cloud to data center or a basement.
As a guy that used to do this, driving in the middle of the night to the server rooms and so on, for me, it's the fact that you have to take care also of the hardware that is running below. And this is a huge thing, because you have to be available in a completely different way. Yes, you can't even fix it from a different country. That's what we can do with cloud. Yes, but I think it comes to the fact that, are you using things like reserved IPs, floating IPs, virtual IPs?
Or do you have a server with managed interfaces? Do you have maybe hired managed services from your data center provider and can send someone to the rack? There's probably more and more of those kind of carriers that will hit you when you suddenly move to even to the managed data center scenario from the cloud setup. Those things are maybe not so obvious, especially for those who started a career when cloud was already well established. And for them, rediscovering all the things that we grew up with is probably something that, well, not hopefully, was taken into account in the conversation to move to the cloud, out of the cloud.
I came to the market when the cloud was quite established, or there was more majority of the organization moving to the cloud. But I had a short experience with, pre-ordering infrastructure in data center of a big company which runs data centers a few months in advance. But also, what goes as someone who's dealing with building data centers at home. There's also, what's going on if you don't have, energy? Is it certified data center? Are you running the server in your house? Because if the power goes down, what's going on? For example, if you're running at your house, you don't have backup power source. Yeah. Is it certified? So you have a lot of stuff connected to hardware as well, which we don't think, as we deal with software with cloud, we don't need to think about it.
Yeah, and go to data center of OVH. Security, barbed wire, multiple large transformers with the power cables coming from 2 different independent power providers and 2 different power plants. Those things are always, once you actually start looking at the operations of data center, and then imagine that cloud is an abstraction on top of multiple of those, and the resiliency that goes into cloud is insane.
That's true. But, it's like the problem is that we take way too many things for granted. I started loving electricity after visiting Africa and having power like 2-3 hours a day, or having no power at all. The same for water and other things, yes? The moment you start traveling and you are cut off, it's kind of like that, yes? So nobody really cares about this unless they are being hit. And I think the biggest hidden cost is that you need actually much smarter people, or not much smarter. You need people with a lot more experience, also in hardware. Because regardless if you're going to run VMware on top of it, or any other hypervisor software or Microsoft thing or whatever, you still have to have the knowledge on how to configure your disks, what kind of disks to buy, how to more or less get things up and running. You can, of course, get others to do it for you, but this is going to cost. And this is, I think, the gap which nobody's saying about. It's cheaper to move things from the cloud to your own machines, but only if you look on the cost, like, okay, how much I pay for the electricity and colocation in a data center versus the cloud. But this Excel doesn't include people and all the incidents that you will have to take care of, especially if you run a business which is, for example, selling online, yes?
Also, another thing which I talked recently with one of the customers, how common is the skill set? So, for example, the skill set for hardware, it's not that common anymore compared to how many people know cloud. If you take these two things, it's much easier to get someone, or the entry point also to the cloud knowledge is much lower versus to the hardware. So you still need people, for example, if you run your own data center, you need someone who's going to connect your cables, as Michal mentioned, and so on. But being able to find these people, that's also not that easy as it used to be some years ago.
Yeah.
So that was, for example, the reason why they moved to cloud in this case.
Yeah, and it's interesting that while you can learn a lot of software from the comfort of your house, learning server-grade equipment is a skill that you cannot easily acquire on your own, right? And where would you have a chance to play with SPF and 25 gigabits network interfaces? This is not a consumer electronics, right? So those things are very different.
But I think you can basically ask a clear question immediately and just ask people about, okay, so which RAID level are you going to run on your new machines? And simply watch them eat their own tail. Because even such a simple thing, I don't know actually if anyone has any idea that you actually have RAID levels from the most popular workforce these days, programmers and so on, yes? Because basically it's usually the owners that want to push it because it's cheaper, yes? That's an incentive. But the problem is you need a new, as you mentioned, yes, you need new skills. You need people that know how to take care of it and that are available.
When you look at those numbers, when you have a spreadsheet in front of you, cloud might feel expensive, more expensive than collocated server in the rack somewhere in the data center. But once you break down the number, this number covers not just the cost of the hardware, electricity, and the network connection. There's also the skill, the maintenance. All those things are those little pieces of sense that add up to your bill. And if you have them, if you have the skills, if you have the experienced workforce, maybe it makes sense to move out of cloud. There are other caveats. We will talk about those later probably. But on a financial and spreadsheet level, it's very rare to be in a situation where you can compensate for all the little things that are already covered in the bill. Speaking of other things, what else could go wrong?
What if a drone crashes on your data center?
Yeah. Actually, the thing which I remember from my early days, but before I go to this story, Paulina, you're the youngest one, and everybody can see this probably. But I will ask you a weird question, but I have to ask it. I'm actually very curious. Have you been working with cloud from the very beginning in your career, or were you actually exposed to, server racks, very cold server rooms, UPCs, and all that weird stuff?
My story is a bit different because I have background in mechatronics. So I was working with hardware during university before I got into IT and started working only with software. So I started working so we had working with both servers and, different type of devices which you need to program and make them work. And they needed to do something because I also saw automation robotics. But when I entered IT, we actually work also with the servers as well at the beginning, but it was mixed. It was a very big organization. So they had everything, to be honest. They had data center servers in big data center in the external company. They have their own data center and they have cloud. So you're kind of exposed to everything at the beginning. But moving forward, I primarily worked with cloud.
And that story, that should go on your LinkedIn, because I didn't know that. And that's really cool, actually. Because you see, the perception is that, yes, because you're so young and you entered, and so I had the idea that maybe you were not working with that. You haven't seen the downside. But I think for me, the guy that was used to do this and come at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning to the server room, I think it's also the availability of people. I mean, if you're an owner of the company, if you are the owner of the company, it's not a problem for you to just, if you are around, park in the middle of night and go and fix it. But other than that, if you have employees for that, you can't just fix it by simple stuff. You have to actually make sure that this is going to be reflected in the salary.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest cost, that you are tied locally to people, and you can't do it on incident basis. You have to actually have some kind of cost which is fixed.
Something very interesting in this department is that there is a misconception that you can fix everything remotely. IPK VMs exist, you can connect with the managed port, and you can fix a lot of stuff. But because of the heritage of cloud, because we are so used to it, people forget your network adapter can physically break. And there is a physical necessity to go and replace a bloody thing. So yes, you can do a lot of remotely. But if you're not there, if something goes wrong, you are in deep trouble.
Yeah.
So the physical aspect is still important. And that brings me to the other point which Paulina brought up, because you, Michal, and Paulina, you're both in Denmark. This week, you have experienced a slew of drone-related incidents around Denmark. You were impacted one way or another. Imagine you're trying to rush to a server which is down, and you can't because there is a police blockage, or you cannot get to the airport, or you cannot fly if you really have to, or take a train because of the local incident, physical incident that prevents you going there. Right? We are not even talking about a drone actually dropping on the data center.
This already happened because Paulina, she couldn't participate in the last week's recordings because she was stopped because of the hacks.
Yeah.
That was in Belgium, actually.
That was in Belgium, exactly. I mean, this is becoming a lot more important. This is also something we have taken for granted for many years, just like the thing with electricity, yes? Stuff is just available everywhere. The
physical world is much less
forgiving.
Forgiving, that's the word. Physical world is much less forgiving than we remember it to be, because everything is so online these days. The moment you leave the online world and you go to physical world, things get messy very quickly. And that's not in your Excel spreadsheet.
And I think another thing which is kind of important, as I will be talking, I would like to ask you, can you please check in Google Maps if you have ever, or any other maps, if you ever had an incident that you had to take care of remotely, and what was the longest distance that you were located at and actually trying to fix something? I'm trying to measure it now. Measure distance. Because I had a situation when you are fixing something remotely, the predictability of the interface that you have at the cloud, yes, it helps a lot. Because usually both people know what to expect in terms of ClickUps, at least, or anything else. And even if your communication channel is degraded, you are, for example, forced to do this over a text messaging, it's still easier because there is a lot of context. When we talk about hardware, going into server rooms, I remember that we had a story that I was actually talking with my friend on the phone, and I was like, so which server is that? And he said, I'm going to eject the CD-ROM on that machine, and that's the one you have to take a look at. But of course, yeah, I think that adds a lot. Do you have your calculations?
I haven't. To be honest, I have no idea. But since I work with like West Coast US organizations, that you can probably get something in San Francisco. I'm not sure how far it is, but it's physically impossible to cover this kind of distance. Even if it was like in typical AWS region in West Virginia in US, you still talk about 4,000 kilometers, right?
Yeah. Paulina? My record is 14,300 kilometers. And because there was no internet, I had to do this over SMS. So this story is actually real. I was helping my customer over the SMS, telling what to check, what to do. And it was much easier because we knew what to expect on both sides, yes? So a lot of the complexity was actually wrapped in software, in interfaces.
Something around 12,000 K. So quite a big one.
Did you have internet?
Yeah, we had internet.
Okay, so that was actually.
And we had also people physically there. In case something was needed, someone could go there.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You have to have someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually say that the biggest convenience is that you can just kill the machines, create new ones, and use all of the nice software tricks like floating APs, virtual APs, whatever, reroute the traffic, and you're up and running. Yes. So basically, security is also kind of important. So the hidden cost of running anything in the IT world is like you can save enormous amount of money on open source, but you have the hidden cost with either being left obsolete, maintenance, or a rapid release that is actually pushing you out.
Yeah. There's also quite a few other factors when you start looking in the cloud versus maybe selected data centers and versus in general choice of hosted location. Interesting example that I took into account when I was building my product. I wanted it to be hosted on a clean energy. It's not the kind of any greenwashing. I just wanted to have a choice. Most data centers in Germany at the time were powered by the coal power plants. Whereas if I put them in France, nuclear power plants. Whether you agree with it's cleaner or not, it's debatable. I know there's a big hoo-ha, but at least you can choose. I know it's cleaner, but you can choose. You can choose your cloud probably gives you location opportunities. Today you can move it to France. Next day you want to move it to Norway, where it's even cleaner. You have the choice of fluidly moving where right now is the cleaner energy flowing. Whereas in other cases, you are at best tied to your local environment because as we said, you have to physically be able to travel there. So either you relocate your business every time you change data center, or you suffer from unreliability of you being able to travel to the data center. So those things can matter as well.
True that.
It's like, Denmark, has clean energy till it's windy.
When it's not windy, we are buying the electricity from Germany.
Please don't. Exactly.
We do actually, and that's when if it's very expensive, it's usually because we are actually being supplied from Germany. We also get something from our northern neighbors, but when it's expensive, it's usually Germany.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have covered almost everything in terms of recent events. I think it would be nice also to talk very quickly about security because at the times when stuff like that happens, we have drones and all other weird things, which, let's be honest, is most likely Russian activity. And at least we know that how creative Russians can get. It's now that people actually should not panic, but actually engage in some kind of a plan.
Yeah.
And it
Are we
shouldn't
talking about
be
business or real life?
I think both, because the whole point is don't panic, but start doing something. In business, it's not just, I think I can see something like that people just buy new licenses, new antivirus software, or like buy products to buy the sense of security. And then they forget to have all the time running security drills and security talks with people so that they are not susceptible to phishing and other things. Because when the door is hard enough, it's easier to just ask people that are inside to open it for you.
Yeah. But sometimes
do you know the same thing as I do?
I think sometimes, people don't go back to basics. As you mentioned, they buy the, what's new and shiny tool, which can easy fix it. But, sometimes you go back to basics. See if you have, for example, automation for passwords rotation or for secrets rotation, to being able to easily do it, map it out, delete unnecessary stuff, check, update your dependencies, check if they don't have, like with this whole NPM package thingy. So it's a lot of very simple stuff which is supposed to be best practices, but they overseen versus going for new and shiny and expensive stuff. So check what you already have versus going for something else very often. You don't need more usually. You just need to improve what you have.
Yeah. One more question to you, Paulina. How many of your customers use YubiKeys? It's okay to say 0. I have yet to see some organization where they actually use YubiKeys. Yeah, you can't count yourself. You can't.
Us.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So my kind of, since we all sharing stories, my stories, when I joined investment bank in 2009, I was making jokes that the project I'm deploying has a disaster recovery plan. Why would we care? Like, it's a funny thing to hear disaster recovery. And then, it's a real thing. Like, banks do it because they are forced by regulation. Great. Then in 14, Hurricane Sandy in New York destroyed data centers, destroyed a lot of things. The bank that I was working with was able to simply switch to different data center. Everyone's happy. You could still use your credit cards. You could still use your infrastructure for bank. You can still broker the deals on the stock market. So those things are, in some industries, those things are already baked into the processes for decades. But not every enterprise is an investment bank. Not every enterprise or even small business thinks about it in the same terms. And if there's anything, the modern conflict that we have on our Eastern European border should make us realize how susceptible we are to those physical threats. And having disaster recovery plan is a must. Now, translate to your personal life as well. Yeah, maybe you have some supplies, maybe you have a way to extract yourself from the conflict. Also probably a good idea.
Yeah, but question which scenarios can you cover in disaster recovery plans? Because you cannot usually don't cover all of them, cover one. And very often it's not the one you should cover. Because sometimes our production go down, but and we can get back our data, but that's all. They don't cover the other cases which they should, what if we cannot recover our data? What if the whole data center goes down? And so it should be, I'm not saying that they cover all of them, but they should do a bit more assessment what actually is crucial for this kind of business or organization we are running.
True that. And only you, the business owner, you can work with people like Paulina or Michal or even maybe myself to draw up what you need to maintain to keep the business continuity, what's necessary to run, and maybe what things you can recover in an hour, what things are required to be recovered in a week, and what we can recover in a month. Those things can be planned, those things can be mapped. Then you put a risk on it and you assign a number and then you invest accordingly.
I think that's true. And in terms of business, we could, of course, cover all those ideas and plans here, but then we would have to probably talk until tomorrow. That's why it makes sense. I think will you agree with me? It depends how to make it smart, because you can't cover everything. You cover only the things that actually make sense. And the same thing as you should do privately. Today, I reposted my own article, which I wrote 7 months ago, where I actually informed people about what is happening on the eastern border is not really, it's progressing in the wrong direction. And since I'm crazy when it comes to walking around mountains and nature and so on, I was saying, listen up, you can actually hit two birds with one stone if you start prepping, but not oh no, I have to buy all the prep stuff and so on. Start prepping by actually making this a part of your life, Take your kids or take yourself, take your partner, whoever, go on a longer walk, buy these cups, take a look on how to make a tea in the middle of the forest or something like that. And today I reposted that one, yes? Now it's too late to make this. To make the idea that it should be a part of your lifestyle. But there's still still things that you can buy to prepare yourself. And I think the goal is how to survive 3 days. Because within 3 days, I think stuff is going to be sorted out. What do you think? You probably have heard also, Jarek, you live in Germany, so you have heard your government probably giving you some ideas.
Yeah, there was a general guidelines to have supplies for, I think, 2 or 3 days was the rule of thumb. I don't necessarily agree with that on the personal life side of things, because how much you can prepare for what happens after those 3 days. In a sense, and what I'm trying to say here is that I don't necessarily believe that 3 days is enough to resolve. As we see on the example of Ukraine, the conflict is in the third, fourth year now, and things are not really progressing in any direction. So I would say it's a little more complex, and preparation for just 3 days is not enough. And whether you can realistically prepare for more than 3 days it's a big question.
That's why it's easier
but I might be wrong. I'm not an expert.
That's why I think it's easier to just project for the 3 days. Paulina, what do you think?
Sure. We need something to be able to survive first few days, but does it solve everything? No, not really. Yeah. It's gonna be sorted within 3 days. Depends what happens. If it's, down of infrastructure, maybe. If it's something bigger, not necessarily.
Yeah, I think the 3 days is going to be also enough time to figure out if you can stay where you are or you actually have to move, yes? I can recommend also something else, which I did last year, which is kind of crazy. I actually paid for a course on how to use all types of guns. I don't have I don't have a license for the gun, but I was thinking like, I've never been to the army, so I was like, I really want to know how to use those things if I'm forced to. And it was actually also fun because guns, of course, that's death and so on. But if you actually add some sport into it and competition in the healthy way, and if you go to a shooting range, that was really cool. And I think we went through something like 12 different types of guns and things like that. And it's so much fun if you're actually working with some ex guys working with some special forces and stuff like that, because they usually also have quite a lot of cool stories.
Yeah, and the same should be said about going back to the kind of topic of this podcast. Like the same should be said about business. Like if you talk with the right people who have experience, who can help you prepare, then you know what's important. It's not necessarily just your problem. You're not left alone in the woods, so to speak, and trying to brew your own tea, because you have support from people who went through this, who have experience, who've seen it across different industries, and can help you find the right things to pay attention to prepare for, to identify what's really important. Because I bet you, if you were to go to a customer today and you ask them what has to be up in a matter of hour after downtime, they'll say everything has to be up, right? But once you start breaking down piece by piece, then you can clarify, okay, what if we do this first? If you do those things together, it's going to be more expensive. What can we sacrifice? And so on. You start unpacking, and you end up with a solid plan. So maybe I'm too early dismissing the whole idea of 2-3 days being prepared. Maybe I should also go and speak to an expert and get convinced that this is actually enough for me to be prepared for 2 days and be much more resilient to whatever comes from the sky.
Before I ask you, Paulina, I think 2 or 3 days is better than nothing. No matter what kind of choice you make, always it's going to be, even 1 day is going to be always better than nothing.
I agree that at least we should, have a basic knowledge what to do in the case of these situations. Because if people don't know, they're gonna panic even more if they would panic when they know. So even some unconscious knowledge, is it IT? Is it, something more serious? If you know what to do in the, stressful situation, which is unpredicted, I think you behave or you operate much better unconsciously and more automatic way versus if you're not prepared for it.
So whether it's cloud migration, whether it's Russian attack, whether this is disaster recovery, I think the plan is the same, right? Have skill, be prepared, and have a plan.
And what you have all said implicitly, do this when the times are good so that you are prepared for when the times are not so good. Thank you very much for today. It went actually, I was very much surprised about stuff I've heard today on a positive side. So thank you. And please remember to follow us, find us. Feel free to reach out directly on LinkedIn or Instagram or YouTube, wherever you can find us, because we are actually answering those things. It's not AI. Thank you, and see you again in the next episode.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.